My guest on this episode of Suds Search is Joy Hawkins. Joy is the owner and founder of Sterling Sky. She is one of, if not the, most recognizable local SEO personalities in the world. It's hard for me to think of anything in local SEO that Joy isn't at least somewhat involved in. She has spoken at every major local SEO conference. A short list of places you might have heard Joy present includes Mozcon Local, SMX, Pubcon, and Whitespark's Local Search Summit. She is the owner of LocalU, the most important conference series for local SEOs in the world. LocalU is more than just a conference series, though. The LocalU website is a go-to destination for local SEOs looking to level up their local SEO knowledge by reading blogs, listening to podcasts, and following the newsletter. Joy is also one of the most important bloggers in local SEO. You can read her column at Search Engine Land. She frequently publishes content over at LocalU and on the Sterling Sky Company blog. I'm going to ask her a few questions about a Whiteboard Friday she did for Moz back in October about what local SEO tactics improve rankings and which do not. In addition to her responsibilities at Sterling Sky, Joy is involved with two important forums. She is a platinum Google product expert at the Google My Business Forum, and she is the owner of the Local Search Forum. I'll start our conversation by asking her about her involvement in both of those important forums. Joy has assembled an all-star team of digital marketers over at Sterling Sky. In 2020, Bright Local nicknamed her staff the Sterling Sky Dream Team. I'm going to ask her what it's like leading this talented team of professionals. Grab something cold to drink and join me for a conversation with Joy Hawkins. We'll talk about why it's harder than you might think for Google to clean up GMB spam, what factors on GMB actually improve rankings. We'll spend a little time talking about the board game Dominion. Joy Hawkins, welcome to Suds Search. How you doing?
Good, thanks for having me.
I'm really happy to have you on. This is long overdue. You're such a great reputation in local SEO. There's hardly anything you don't touch or that you're not involved in some way. We could go through some of those things in just a little bit, but I asked Mike Blumenthal a similar question. With everything you have going on and everything you touch in this, you must really like it. What keeps this interesting for you?
I love that it's always changing. I do feel like SEO is getting more challenging, like harder than it used to be like 10 years ago. And I like that. I feel like it separates people that are going to excel really well from people that are trying to catch up, but just don't have the right processes nailed down.
Okay. Well, great. And so I mentioned some of those things that you're involved in. There are two forums that you're very involved in, the GMB forum, where you're a product expert, and the Local Search Forum, which you bought in 2018. For one thing, can you help our audience? I know a little bit about this, but can you differentiate these two forums and who should be on which one? Who should go to which one?
Yeah, so the Google My Business Forum is owned by Google, and it's run by a group of volunteers. So although there are Google employees behind it, you're not going to really interact or talk to them directly on the forum. You're going to get a group of volunteers that I'm a part of called Product Experts. And basically, that's a good place to go if you're trying to get support for a specific issue. So, if you need help getting a duplicate listing removed or something, and the regular Google support channel is giving you a hard time or not working, the forum is kind of a place that I send people as a backup option if you're not getting anywhere with normal support.
Okay. All right. Very good. So you're not just a product expert. You are, I think, a platinum product expert. So these things go in tiers. I think it's helpful for people who don't know. Sometimes I mentioned this. Sometimes when I get on with local SEOs, it becomes like inside baseball, and I run right through things that I should probably explain to a layman. But a product expert this is not a non-paid position. It is at best indirectly benefits Sterling Sky. Why do it? Why did you decide to go through all this work?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said it didn't benefit my agency, but if that's kind of the sole reason for becoming a product expert, I'd say that you're in for a shock, because it's a lot of time and effort, and it doesn't pay, right? So Google's not paying, and literally every morning when I get on and I'm answering people's threads and whatnot, these are people that aren't paying for my time. They're not customers. They're just getting free help and support. So I think to go down the route of being involved in that group, you have to like helping business owners, and you have to have time that you can dedicate to it, knowing that it's an unpaid job. I liked doing it because I found that my knowledge and experience with Google My Business really grew as a result of it. I liked being being able to spot what the current trends were and what challenges people are facing right now and figure out how to solve those. So that's kind of why I do it.
Okay, great. Well, the other thing I was going to ask you about, so we have the product expert, we have the GMB forum, but you actually are the owner of a forum, which is really interesting. This was something that happened in, I think, if I have my date right, 2018, if my research is correct. How does one even go about owning a forum? Tell me the backstory of this, because I've got to know how even somebody gets to own a forum.
Yeah. So the Local Search Forum, in contrast to the GMB Forum, we run it at Sterling Sky. It's pretty much dedicated to all topics and things related to local search. So I'd say it's a better place to know or talk about like new features Google has, or like problems you're facing with several listings, or just kind of trends and stuff. Like if you're like, I need help with a very specific issue that only Google can fix, that would be, something for the GMB Forum. As far as how we got involved with it, Linda Bouquet started the forum, I want to say 2014, but she just decided when Google Plus was going away, kind of around the same time, that she wanted a place or a community that she controlled where people could talk about local search. And, Facebook's great for that, but Facebook owns that and they can make changes and they can do whatever they want. So owning a forum is kind of nice because it can control the way it looks, ranks on Google, things like that. But I purchased it off of her because she approached me about it and she was looking to retire and kind of get out of the industry. And we were already really super active on the forum. So it was a really smooth kind of transition. But yeah, it's really great. Again, another place that we volunteer a lot of time and effort, and a lot of users on there regularly. I think we have like 8,000 something members.
Well, great. Well, it's a great place to go, and we'll put links in the show notes to both of those places. I also just want to say the group of product experts, we talked a little bit about product experts, but every single one that I know, it's just a cool group of people. They're really neat and smart and just want to help people out. And so everybody you're going to interact with there, especially and including Joy Hawkins, is going to do a great job for you. I mentioned that when I get on with local SEOs, I have this problem of too much inside baseball, that there's a little bit of like I can go down a rabbit's hole and the average audience member doesn't really get a lot out of it. But one of the things I loved about your vice president, Colin Nielsen, was he wrote a blog post that was very simple for everybody to understand, which is, should a small business have a blog? Which I thought was a great question. It was really interesting. And he put all these different comments from people, and there were people on both sides of the fence. And I think ultimately he had the age-old answer for SEO that it depends. I'm curious what Joy Hawkins thinks. What do you think about a small business?
Yeah, so I'd say the whopping majority of our clients do not need a traditional type blog. So I actually just emailed one of my clients earlier today and told them that I want to change their blog role, their blog page, to be a static page, because they don't constantly post stuff on there, and the stuff they do post, it's not time sensitive. So articles they wrote years ago are still relevant today and still important. They still rank. So I want to actually drive more traffic to those pages by making it like a static page and just break it down by categories. And I would say like almost all of our clients fit into that. Sterling Sky would be an example of a company like my agency. We need a blog because the stuff that we're posting about is time sensitive, and it is like, hey, Google launched this new feature, but people probably aren't going to care about that in 4 years. So it really depends on the business type, and then like if the content is time sensitive.
Oh, interesting. So what would be an example of a time sensitive one? For a very common example in local SEO would be attorneys, for example. So when do attorneys have time sensitive information that needs to be on a blog? What could be an example?
Pretty rarely, I would say. Most of our attorneys don't need blogs, but I would say one is an immigration attorney. I know, with all of the stuff with constantly changing laws on that stuff, and it seems to be something that's very political in nature, which is, time sensitive. They would be an example of one that would likely want a blog approach. If they were regularly writing about, new administration, what does this mean for immigration law, and like stuff like that, it's changed a lot.
Great. I mean, and I think it's a compelling question. I'm not sure, It definitely will help your traffic. Like if you just are after traffic as your overall line, that would help. But there's some really interesting things. Again, I'll try and I have to remember to put all these things in the show notes, but I'll put a link to Colin's article. But one of the things that he found was like a shockingly small number of conversions from all this blogging that people were doing. So bravo to him. And that was a great article. The other thing I wanted to ask you a little bit about was reviews, if we could. And so, one of the things that happens is that we understand that reviews, the quantity of reviews is important. The overall sentiment is really important, not just in terms of where you rank in maps, but also just in terms of whether you're going to get that click through. What we've found so much in local is that the incentives drive the behavior. And so we're seeing more and more review spam than I think I've ever seen. I don't know if you would agree with that, but it seems to be even more increasing. You recently mentioned some updates to this. If somebody who's listening to this has been a victim of review fraud, so for instance, like an unscrupulous competitor starts to just post a bunch of fake reviews about you, or an ex-employee does, what sort of recourse do they have?
Yeah, so not a lot. I think Google is really awful at enforcing their review guidelines, both with fake negatives and fake positives. Like we see both as problems. If it's not super obvious in the review that it violates their guidelines, often they don't get removed. So like, for example, if it's an employee, let's say it's an employee that you fired and they're pissed off and they go and leave you a review, technically that violates Google's guidelines because you're not allowed to review the place that you work. But if you don't say you're an employee in the review, like you don't explicitly state that, a lot of times Google won't remove it because they're like, well, we don't know this was an employee, even though you say they are. So it's tricky. I think Google has a lot of improvement to make on this. But on the flip side, we see Yelp, who is like the opposite extreme. They police too much, like they filter too much. And so it's hard. Like, I don't know where the balance is. I just know that Google's got a long way to go.
You might know this. Where does it go? If I hit flag, I flag a review and it's I say, it's hate speech or something like that. Where does that end up? Does a human being do that, or is there some sort of AI that resolves this for Google?
So it depends on where you flag it. So if you're flagging it on Google Maps as a user, honestly, I have no idea what happens to those. I feel like it gets put in a queue and doesn't get addressed very quickly. If it's a business owner flagging it inside the Google My Business dashboard, it will get reviewed in 3 days. They actually have that as a threshold, and it does get reviewed by a human, to my knowledge. And if that doesn't work, like you'll usually get an email after the fact that states like, this review was removed for policy violations, or it wasn't. If you don't get one of those emails or nothing happens in 3 days, you can contact Google My Business support about it and plead your case. Because with flagging it, you don't get to put in any notes or anything. Like there's absolutely nothing that gets sent to Google. So sometimes you do need to follow up 3 days later, but you have to wait 3 business days for them to review it.
Well, it's interesting. We mentioned reviews are a pain in the butt for all local SEOs. There are some other things that are not new. They have been a problem for a long time. And you've been talking about this for a very long time, is using a keyword in the business name, that there's this overweighting from Google on using a keyword in the business's name, that this is sort of in the relevancy signal portion of it, that this is not new, that this is something that people were talking about as long as I've been doing this, that this is something that can be, spammed or taken advantage of. If you know this, and I know this, and everyone who's listening to this knows this, and we know it's been going on for a long time, and we know that the incentives drive the behavior, so more and more businesses are going to do it insofar as they can get away with it. What accounts for Google not taking more action? Why can't they clean up this sort of feature that everybody talks about all the time for years now?
I think that the main reason is I don't think Google can quite understand what's a branded search and what's a non-branded search. So if they were to remove keywords from the business name as a ranking factor, that might actually screw it up to the point where you search for Starbucks and you don't actually get a Starbucks location. So I think they have a hard time, and actually business owners, with the way that they're adapting to this and making their names keywords, are making it even harder for Google.
Right.
Because I see this all the time. We have a good example would be in Chicago. If you search things like cash for junk cars, Chicago, there are like 15 businesses that are legitimate businesses that have like names that are so similar. Like you wouldn't even know if they're the same business or different ones because they're all keywords. That's gonna be really challenging for Google. Like I don't know how they're gonna address that. So I think it's a bigger problem that they need to solve, and I just don't think they have the ability to do it yet.
Yeah, it is. You're right to say it's not an easy problem to solve because of exactly the use case you use, where sometimes people really are just looking for the business name. So, I had a question about GMB. So you had this great Whiteboard Friday back in October. You talked about some things that matter and some things that don't in terms of ranking by what you put into your GMB. I'm curious if you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but if you remember, one of those was putting a keyword in the business name. What are some other things that people can do on their GMB in order to improve their ranking?
Yeah, so the other 3 factors that influence ranking were reviews, what website page you link to. So that's one that we are constantly testing because sometimes it makes more sense to link to the homepage. We've seen other cases where linking to the location page actually improves ranking. For practitioners, there's things that you can do like link to, I don't know if it was like a doctor and they have a certain procedure that they specialize in, linking to that page on the website instead of the doctor's profile. So the website field is something you can kind of mess around with. And then the 4th one was categories. And this would just be the only real to-do action there is to make sure you have all the right categories on your listing, that you put the right one as the primary category, because I see that done wrong a lot. People want to rank for this query, but they have the wrong primary category, so they don't rank as well. And then keeping up with like new categories. Like if you're an agency, we have a free resource on our website where we track GMB category changes and put out ones that are new. And so that would be a good thing to track if you're an agency with lots of different types of clients.
Yeah, very interesting. And then the cool thing about the Whiteboard Friday, though, is there's these other things that don't impact ranking, but I still think are really important. I still think, we can get overly reliant on, does it make me rank or doesn't it? Q&A, I still think you should be really active in your Q&A and seed your Q&A and do all these things that we talk about. You should really be, you should take advantage of Google Posts. What is if you wanted to describe this, why should people take advantage of Q&A, posts, these other things that you mentioned in your article, even though it may not help you move up in the rankings?
So the person that are seeing those things are somebody that's searching you by name, generally speaking, unless they're like really clicking around and searching for more details. Because technically, if you do a search on Google for like plumber Milwaukee, and then you do click on a specific business, you will see more details about like posts and Q&A and stuff. But generally speaking, it's someone who's doing a search for your business name. So they already know you exist. They already know about your business. They're kind of in the research phase. They're not just looking what companies exist. So it gives you the opportunity to just convert them, to sell them on why you're better than your competitors. So I think it is important. Where I struggle is where I see these posts all the time from people, like all the time on forums and in Facebook groups where they're like, oh yeah, I've got this client, we're trying to improve their ranking and we're doing posts monthly and we're adding photos. And I'm like, these are not things that are going to increase your client's ranking. Like if that's your end goal, you're going to be disappointed. So yeah, it's just a disconnect in what you're doing it for.
No, it makes perfect sense. Well, before I let you go, I had a couple of other questions for you about the Sterling Sky Empire. So LocalU has gone virtual now. What's on tap for 2021? Can you look into the crystal ball at all and see what's in store for that conference series this year?
Yeah, so we're likely going to be doing 3 events. I think that's going to be our norm for now. And they're probably all going to be virtual, which I'm sad to say, but that's how it's shaping up to be. We just launched our next date, which is April 7th. So that's the next LocalU, and we're meeting next week to talk about the agenda. So likely by the time that this gets published, the agenda will be live. But yeah, until things change, they will be virtual events, but we have a smaller audience. And last time that we did an event, we did a Slack group where people could interact directly with speakers all day. There was like tons of activity and conversation. So we're trying to mimic the real life experience as much as possible. So I do think there's a lot of benefit there, hopefully for the attendees being able to kind of still talk one-on-one with who they want to talk to.
Oh, great. And then the last thing, I wonder if you could brag about your people a little bit. I have to give him credit at some point, but somebody nicknamed your team the Sterling Sky Dream Team, and it's not hard to see why. So many talented people work there, people who've been on the show already, or I'd like to. I got to get my buddy Brian Barwig, who works with you, is in Chicago, so I'm just waiting for the pubs to open up before I can have him on. What does it mean to you to have this reputation, to be known as the Sterling Sky Dream Team?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're only as successful as we are because of everyone. Like it's a collaborative effort. It's not just like one person that's doing all the lifting and then everybody else is kind of riding the wave. So I'm very fortunate to work with people that I work with. Literally had to set up a separate company in the US just to be able to hire the people that I wanted as a Canadian. So it was a lot of work, but well worth it in my opinion. Like I think Bright Local gave us that name, but I agree that these people are just wonderful to work with. So.
Well, great. Well, this is my last part of the show. This is where Greg Gifford gives me a question with no context. It's a little bit of a high wire act for both of us, and we'll see how this goes. Today, he just gave me one word, and I don't know what this means at all. So sometimes I can figure it out, but does this word dominion mean anything to you?
That's awesome. It's a board game that I'm a little obsessed with. So for people that like strategy board games like Settlers of Catan, things like that, Greg and I actually played Dominion in Las Vegas at the last Pubcon that happened in real life. So I have I think there's 13 expansions for it, and that didn't happen all at once. I just kept buying them until I had them all, but it's a fantastic board game.
Well, outstanding. Our last leadership retreat, we were playing some crazy board game I never heard of either. So I'll bring it out next time. Thank you for the recommendation. So Joy, any other way people can get in touch with you? What's your favorite social media, and how can people connect with your company?
So Twitter definitely is where I'm most active. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well, although I have to admit I don't pay as much attention to that platform because it's a lot of spam that we get there. But Twitter, I'm super active on, so feel free to tweet me any questions you have, or the Local Search forum. I literally am on that forum all the time, so it's another great place to post questions.
Well, great. Well, thank you for everything you're doing to educate local SEOs like me and my team. And it's been great to have you on. The audience didn't know this, but this is actually the second time I've had you on because of our technical screw-ups the first time. So I really appreciate you being so cool to come on a second time and do this with us. So Joy, thanks again. For everybody else, I'm going to sign off for now, and we'll see you on Suds Search next week.